Hello, America. Welcome back to Your Leo Nation. Your Leo Nation is where we believe in and support the rule of law, a civil society, self-responsibility. Got some heavy stuff to talk about today. And joining us again, he was so popular from our last show. Couldn't wait to have him back. Marcelo Arrue, my best friend for 40 years. He was 2 when we met, and I was 60. But I'm 60 now. It's crazy. But
happy to be back.
Yeah, glad to have you here. It's a great time. Obviously, Marcelo's 20-year veteran of law enforcement, and just a great asset to have in these heavy times. And I talk about heavy. It's for law enforcement. It's just not good news for the profession right now. I'm sure all of you, if not almost everybody, has seen and listened to the video from the Memphis Police Department. Look, there's no other word for it. It's ugly. It's ugly. This is a blow to law enforcement. I've watched almost all of the video, quite frankly, even after 30 years of law enforcement myself, and some of the things I've seen in video or in person, I actually had to stop watching it. Marcelo, I know you and I were talking about it here just before the show started.
Yeah, it's disappointing. It's disturbing. Those two words come to mind, and it's unfortunate. It really is. It's unfortunate because, as I've always said, you can't judge a police department or a nation of police officers over one incident. But it is very disturbing. The control of these officers shown in the video was not there. The compassion that they should have had for this individual was not there. Their discipline and their training, more importantly, was also lacking. So it's unfortunate. We have to understand that use of force is part of law enforcement, but you only use the force necessary to do 3 things. That's effect an arrest, overcome resistance, and prevent escape. Once those things are accomplished, there is no more need to continue to use force. And it seems like in the video, as we saw, this individual was already cuffed and continually got kicked in the head. He was stood up as he was cuffed. I saw 2 huge blows to his face. It just, what can you say? It's saddening. It really is.
It is saddening, and you touched on something important about really the purpose and the limits of use of force. And when you go back and watch, if you haven't watched the video, folks, watch it. Like I said, I couldn't watch all of it. It was, I just about got sick to my stomach on the second scene. So there are two scenes here, basic scenes. And the first, according to the reports, is initiated by a traffic stop. The traffic stop actually was a result of let's stop. God. Always unplug that thing. Forgot. I always unplug it. Forgot today. Are we able to? Do you want us to cut back?
Just say, okay, we're back or something like that.
You sure?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah, it'll just be a quick cut. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, I feel horrible. Okay.
Or if you want to reset from what you were saying, go for it.
I'll just start with. If I start seeing it, it's going to be hard for you to edit.
I think it would be best just to reset.
From the very beginning, start over.
No,
just say we're back.
Yes.
Okay.
Just take it back a little bit. Just for the, I think it'll look better.
Okay. So what do you want me to say when I come? We're back.
Yeah. Yeah, you can say that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean.
It's a transition, you know.
All right.
Well, you can start from the first scene.
Okay, I'll just say there are two scenes here.
Yes, yes.
Is that going to be okay for you to fix
yes,
it?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
There's two scenes here.
And I can just keep talking?
Yep.
Okay. So there are two basic scenes here from the Memphis incident, and we were talking earlier, Marcelo, about training. We're talking about tactics,
Right.
and the reports are that this this encounter started as a result of a traffic stop. Apparently, Tyre Nichols was driving recklessly. Again, this is what we're told.
Mm-hmm.
And this Memphis, Tennessee officer initiated a traffic stop,
Mm-hmm.
which is all fine.
Right.
But when you look at what the officer did when they made the stop,
Right.
he immediately rushes the car
Right.
and pulls the driver, Tyre, out of the car. And
Right.
almost immediately there's a use of force. Well, that's a use of force by definition right there. You put hands on, you pull someone out of the car. You and I have, I said, 50 years combined of law enforcement training and experience, and literally between us, probably thousands of traffic stops. I'll get your take on this, but there's three basic, at least I'm trained in. You have a low risk traffic stop, which people consider a typical traffic stop.
Right.
You have a high risk and a felony.
Right.
And those levels can vary, I'm sure, from agency to agency or region to region. But that's basically what we're looking at here.
Right.
But here's the commonality between any levels of those stops. You never rush a car and pull someone out of the vehicle. Am I wrong?
Absolutely right. So, so some of that is because of the unknown, right? So you make a traffic stop. We have to remember that when an officer makes a traffic stop, he has time to run the plate. Information comes back, but you have to remember that the information that comes back, unless there's a warrant on the car, that's one thing. It'll be a Coast 6 Charles vehicle, right? Then that turns into now a high risk stop, right? Because the warrants on the vehicle doesn't necessarily mean that the person driving it is that person. We have to understand that we have limited information when we run a vehicle. It is name, registration, address, whoever the car is registered to, as you know. But that's all the information you have. Now, when someone is driving recklessly, we have to understand, one, do we know if he's escaping from a shooting?
Mm-hmm.
Did he just rob somebody? You don't have that information. And so that's the reason why you don't go rushing a vehicle, opening the door and pulling somebody out. You have no idea, even if it's for reckless driving, you have no idea why this person's doing what he's doing.
Well, and it was absolutely right, but and not to mention the fact that this is the worst example of officer safety.
Oh, 100%.
Or a perfect example of lack of officer safety. You rush up and you put yourself in a position of exposing yourself wide open like a bullseye to the driver. There's no time to evaluate the inside of the vehicle, to find out if this person's armed, to see where their hands are, if they're passengers, if there's a weapon secreted. So I'm focusing on this initial contact with Mr. Nichols to really expose the lack of awareness, apparently either the lack of training or the disregard for training that this officer and everybody involved exhibited throughout this entire encounter from beginning to end.
Yeah, no, and I would find it hard to believe that this is the training that they receive in the academy. In the academy, you're told, well, one, if you look at the video, it looks like he comes from the side of the vehicle, not behind. So, we're taught that when you do a traffic stop, you're behind the vehicle. You approach obviously with caution. When you're speaking to someone, you're speaking not at the threshold of the door, but almost at the threshold of the back door.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives that person much more difficulty if he does have a weapon to turn his body, and that's why we do it, and we use also our lights to do some sort of limited vision to see which way the officer is approaching. Two of the most dangerous things an officer can do, and that is approach a vehicle or go into a house. And I find it very difficult to believe that this is the Memphis PD training. I think it was negligent on his part. I mean, at the very least for officer safety issues, like you said. And if it was a reckless driver and you need another unit, I just don't see the immediate action to go and open someone's door and pull them out of a vehicle the way this occurred, the way this officer did.
Yeah, neither do I. And we'll take a look here a little bit at the second part. So for people who may not have seen the video, there's the initial contact. This primary officer and other officers pull him from the car. He's on the street. There's mace or pepper spray is utilized several times when you have several officers there against the driver, and eventually he breaks free and runs. And this takes us to the second scene here. I'll pull the video up here on my phone just to so I know I have the right timing here. But there's a second scene here. It looks like there was what we call a bolo, a be on the lookout. I'm sure that was initiated with this, a description of the driver. He ran, he's on foot, and it's clear that he was re-encountered by a different officer and or officers where he's detained and eventually handcuffed. And it appears, well, I don't know who they are. I'm going to make an assumption here that in the scene, eventually 2 more officers show up. I'm guessing those were the initial officers that made the stop, or some officers from that initial scene. And like I said, I've seen a lot of use of force. I've been involved in a lot of use of force, whether justified or not. I'm talking about in my previous, either as a participant or as a viewing public. I've never seen anything like this. I'm counting right now on this video, the one I'm watching, about 3 minutes into it, about 3:05 or so. I'm counting 5 officers that have him handcuffed, and I could go in great detail here, but we're looking at fist punches to the face. We're looking at him being kicked in the face when he's on the ground.
Yes.
We are looking at an officer utilizing an ASP, a collapsible baton, striking him at least 2 times.
Right.
And the idea that this man is still a threat to the officers or anybody at this point is just fiction. What appears to me is that, like you said, he made it so clear that this is almost certainly not reflective of any training from the Memphis Police Department, no post-training, no standardized training would encourage these officers to behave like this. These look like a bunch of animals to me. I don't know what else to say. They are in a rage. They are without any control. And not from the time of the initial traffic stop did I see anything that resembles de-escalation. Not in general, or not from a particular officer even trying to intervene.
No, and just watching this video, 2 officers are obviously, as they say, putting the boots to him, and trying to, not just trying to subdue the Tyre, but there's a third officer that isn't really involved, walks away, and then comes back and kicks him twice in the head. I don't understand that. I mean, it's just, I mean, you continue, now you've got 3 officers on him, and here comes a 4th officer with a collapsible baton, turns to the side, and now repeatedly hit him 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 times. He is cuffed at this point. He was cuffed before that. They have him stand up, and here comes 2 blows to the face, which then puts him down on the ground again. It just, God, it's just so disturbing to see this. You know what? And I can pretty much guarantee that this is not Memphis PD procedure. And like I said before, unfortunately, in the business of law enforcement, yes, you have uses of force. And I can say that even good uses of forces don't look good on video. And they're not meant to look good. It's a use of force. It's you know, you have to use force to subdue this person. But that being said, there is a limited amount of force that we have to use. And I believe that all law enforcement agencies establish this parameter. And as we said before, yes, we have to use force, and for as far as I know, you know, the force that we use has to be reasonable.
Right.
And it has to be to effect an arrest, overcome resistance, and prevent escape. Mm-hmm. But that said, once that person is cuffed,
all bets off.
All bets off.
Yeah.
You know,
all bets and all hands off.
Right.
Except for,
at that point, if it was a fight between you and a suspect, once that person is cuffed, he's either sat up or stood up, and an RA is called for to render aid.
And the thing is, and we know even with that, there, I wouldn't say rare, but there are exceptions. In other words, you can still have someone violent who's handcuffed and somewhat dangerous with their feet. There are restraints designed for that. We've all used them. Either they can still kick you, they can kick out windows of the patrol car, sure, whatever it is. But those are exceptions. And obviously, looking at this, there was no need for that. On the initial stop, Tyre was saying, okay. Hey, what do you want me to do? There was no resistance from the beginning, not one bit that I could see. So I'll say this, that, look, this is the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. Clearly, there was no racial issue here, which is telling. We have 5 black officers. We have a black suspect, a black driver. So there's no racial issue here. Here's the issue, that these 5 people, mm-hmm, I hate to even call them officers because this is part of our profession, and these monsters are right now, unfortunately, they're the recent face of law enforcement in the most negative way, the most demeaning way. They do not represent the 98% of officers who do the right thing every single day. But these people became enraged animals. They were angry that he was running from them or whatever may have sparked them. They exhibited none of the professionalism that almost every other officer of the 800,000 in this country exhibit every single day. But I'll say this, that the police chief there, I didn't see the video until, recently, like everybody else. I saw it right when it came out. But the weeks leading up to this, and again, every agency has their own procedure. Right. California Highway Patrol, LAPD, NYPD, whatever it is, have their own procedure as far as discipline, review, internal investigations, dismissal, suspensions. But with this agency, the chief, when she saw the evidence, she fired these individuals as fast as their policies and procedures and laws within Tennessee would allow. And then the DA filed second-degree murder charges against these individuals. And I'll be honest with you, look at this video. I'm surprised it was second degree. I mean, we know the laws. you and I do. First degree murder obviously has a higher level of intent, specificity. I get that. But my God, if they had filed first degree murder charges, it wouldn't surprise me. But in my opinion, based on what we saw here, the system worked. And as far as the internal review process and as far as the criminal process, that the system has worked. Not to mention the fact, federal charges are coming to these guys. So no matter what happens in the state, there's going to be more from the feds. Right. So I'll say that the system worked.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to weed out these officers that abuse their power and that use their powers as police officers. We have to understand that people that are in law enforcement, I can tell you that all the people that I know in law enforcement don't want to see this type of enforcement. They don't want to see the bad apples that tarnish the badge, that tarnish the career of these good law enforcement officers. I'm happy in the instance that this was captured on tape, that it's out there for the public, because there should be transparency. And our cameras, everyone has body worn cameras now, which is a good thing. I always thought it was a good thing because it keeps everyone honest, and you can't avoid the video,
right?
And so in that instance, I'm happy that this video and this I think this camera, this was from an overhead. It was a residence, I believe, camera, and it just shows that I can understand why people are disturbed. I'm disturbed. I know you are, but like you said, the system works. But I have to say that I know that Memphis, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, doesn't matter what law enforcement agency you're from, we don't want this type of behavior. We don't want this type of officer in the field.
No.
It just makes it so much harder for the good officers to do their job. Because unfortunately, you have people out there that look at the uniform and they just connect you with that video, even though you had nothing to do with it. Even here in Los Angeles, I mean, we had civil unrest. Sorry, not civil. We had a riot.
Yeah, exactly.
Politicians call it civil unrest.
Well, even
it was a riot.
Even we're getting brainwashed with this stuff. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So this riot that occurred to George Floyd didn't even happen in Los Angeles, and yet we were, or the LAPD and all local law enforcement in Los Angeles, CHP, sheriffs, all had to take the blunt of this action. And so, I just hope that people understand that nobody wants these kind of officers on the streets. That being said, don't judge every officer on this instance. Don't judge every officer on what occurred in Memphis or what occurred to George Floyd. Mm-hmm. I said, we just can't do that. It's just unfair to do that.
It's unfair. And look, this case, it isn't getting more emotional. I mean, I feel for this man's family, listening to his mother, being parents. These emotions are powerful. And on the other hand, from a rational point of view, we all have to realize that these things, out of the 10 million enforcement contacts law enforcement officers make every year, this type of use of force is rare, not to mention this type of felonious use of force. So speaking about good officers, which are almost all of them, do the right thing.
Absolutely.
I want to juxtapose this case in Tennessee with some recent stuff, and maybe one case specifically here in California with LAPD. It's got a lot of attention. And again, we've talked about this. We've printed some things up here. about another in custody death, considered in custody because even though the suspect died later on, it's still considered an in custody death based on some parameters. But if you haven't seen the video, this is the one involving Keenan Anderson. Keenan Anderson
Yeah.
in Los Angeles LAPD, and we could talk about this, but this is an instance where you and I think every law enforcement professional and people who are not even in law enforcement look at this and say, "My God, these officers exhibited more patience than maybe I would at the time, and they did everything."
Right.
So,
Right.
you want to get a little bit of background on that?
Well, so the incident with Keenan Anderson, this was a traffic collision. I mean, not a big deal. The problem is that he started walking away or running away from the scene of the accident. Luckily, at that point, a motor officer was there, uh, was incredibly calm, and telling Mr. Anderson to calm down, just relax. You could tell that Mr. Anderson was very agitated. He seemed that his heart rate was going at 100 miles a minute, and but the officer showed a lot of restraint. Told him just to sit on the sidewalk. Um, at that point, I think from there, Mr. Anderson decided to start running. Now, the officer, of course, had to do his job. Um, it's just there's such a huge contrast between Memphis and what happened to Mr. Anderson.
Mhm.
I mean, those officers, I can't tell you how proud I am to see these officers show that kind of restraint and use the policies that are in place for the LAPD.
Mm-hmm.
They used verbalization, which is a form of de-escalation,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get him to calm down. And it just seemed it wouldn't work. It would not work. Unfortunately, then they had to go to a taser, which was completely within policy. So just so we understand, so the public understands, when we're using a taser as a reasonable force option, it's to control a suspect when the suspect presents an immediate threat to the safety of officers or others.
Mm-hmm.
When they used that taser, they could not control Mr. Anderson. They tried. Finally they had to use the taser to effect an arrest, which is part of the use of force policy,
Mm-hmm.
and to obviously overcome his resistance and prevent escape.
Well, let me just interrupt there about the taser, because when you watch that video, and please go look it up, Keenan Anderson, LAPD, you can watch the whole thing. And by the way, I said it's so refreshing, because when you watch this video as opposed to the one out of Tennessee, every one of these officers exhibited patience, they exhibited self-control, de-escalation, and even with the taser, when you watch the taser, the officer is screaming, "Stop it, stop resisting, or I'm going to use the taser." He gave warnings even before the taser was utilized. And by the way, in what we call in this case a drive stun, because there's two different modes you can have the taser in, with the prongs, or you can actually contact the device directly to the suspect's clothing or skin. In this case, it was a drive stun, and so they are going to every length possible to get this person to comply with the least amount of force possible. Just showed ultimate professionalism. And by the way, and we'll fast forward, come back to a little bit, but the Mr. Anderson actually died, I believe, a few hours later at the hospital. But I just wanted to chime in there about even the taser. They showed restraint before they used it, and they could have right away.
And not only that, but they actually warned him that they weren't going to use the taser,
right?
Which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Because it says when feasible, you want to warn the person about a taser.
When feasible.
So, yeah, when feasible.
Mm-hmm.
And the officer found that it was feasible for him to give the warning, some officers may have said, no, I had hands on. I couldn't verbalize I was going to use the taser, which is perfectly fine.
Marcelo, are you telling me? Are you actually insinuating or implying? What's the right word here? That officers have to make split-second decisions on the fly for their safety and the safety of those around them. Is that what you're telling me?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah. So, but that just goes to the professionalism of these officers, that they had the opportunity to warn him that they were going to use the taser, yet he still resisted arrest. So, I mean, that to me is, I commend them. I really do. I commend these officers for their patience. I commend them for their professionalism. They're adhering to policy and taking Mr. Anderson into custody. A simple, and this just goes back to the unknown. Unfortunately, we're not in a video game.
Right.
We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball that says that, oh, this is just a traffic accident. There is nothing that's normal about anything nowadays. A traffic accident turns into a person running, turns into a use of force. You have no idea what is going to expire from an incident. And this is why your training is so important. This is why I'm such against people that say defund the police. You cannot defund the police and then ask for more training. Officers need more training, but let's defund them.
Right.
How are you possibly going to do that? So, that being said, training has to be consistent. A police department that doesn't give their officers the proper training, it is the responsibility of that department. This is why I am against when I hear LAPD officers say we shoot once every other month. So you're supposed to be efficient with a weapon that can take someone's life, but yet you shoot once every other month. I've seen the range. It's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes, and it's every other month. So you're telling me that you're sending out police officers who are shooting every other month for no more than maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And that is your response to, you have to be efficient with your weapon.
Right.
Well, but let's go to the other scenario. Metropolitan Division. I know that those officers shoot every month. They have a whole day of shooting, and they shoot all their weapon systems. All 3 of their weapon systems, including less lethal, they shoot every single month. In addition to that, they have a tactics day every single month. So they're constantly pushing the envelope in training.
And when we say tactics, for those people who may not be in law enforcement, we're talking about not only the weapon systems themselves, but how to utilize those weapons in real life scenarios. So so building entry, cover concealment, suspect control, negotiation. These are all tactics we're talking about. They train on. Now, you make a great point about Metropolitan Division that I know very well, and other specialized tactical units. We're talking about a higher level of training than maybe the patrol officer, because that is, for lack of a better phrase, that's their reason for existing. Metropolitan. But you make a good point about, is reducing the frequency or level of training ever a good idea? Is it ever a good idea? And I guess one can overtrain, but I'm with you. And I've seen this with other agencies over the last few years where they've actually reduced the frequency of just range training, just the basic firearms proficiency. They've reduced the frequency. And good. Is shooting, 15 times a day over, a week or a month, I'm sorry, is that overkill? Yeah, probably. But is going to every other month a good idea? In my opinion, probably not. There's probably a middle ground here. And I'm with you about evaluating that, and certainly the defund movement. And by the way, we're going to get into that here real quick and briefly about people talking about taking money away from law enforcement, not calling it defunding anymore. But with that said, going back to the training, whatever level of training these LAPD officers got, damn it, they did a great job with this suspect. And I mean, again, just like I said, I've never seen anything so bad with the Memphis, Tennessee incident. The way these LAPD officers handled Keenan Anderson was exemplary, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So getting to that, I want to talk about some of these people jumping to conclusions that have no training, have no expertise in law enforcement, chiming in on social media, chiming in at press conferences, chiming in at city council meetings, whatever it may be, saying what should have been done, what we need to do next time, where these guys screwed up and they have no idea what they're talking about. Absolutely. So I know LAPD Protective League actually issued a statement on some of this, and if you wanted to read some of that.
So this was a great statement by the Los Angeles Police Protective League, and they're talking about facts between myth and misunderstanding. And I truly believe that the politicians today they lack the understanding of law enforcement. They lack the understanding of procedure. And so they just speak off the cuff, if you will, but with lack of knowledge. And that's very dangerous, in my opinion. So just let me read this short statement. Well, it's actually not a short statement, but I'm going to read this small part of it. It says there appears to be a lack of understanding of the LAPD's Mental Evaluation Unit, also known as MEU, mission, policies, procedures, and protocols. In addition, there appears to be a lack of knowledge as to how many MEU SMART units, very, very important. I'll continue. MEU SMART units, which consist of one armed police officer and one Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health clinician, are available. And here's where it's very important. And this is where I say you must understand what we have at the moment. Are available citywide at any one time, and how many calls for service the MEU receives in a given year. Outstanding. Because the LAPD, and I'll just throw out a number, 300 calls a day, and you have one mental evaluation clinician available. Even if you had a quarter of those to be mental evaluation, that person could not get to all those calls. It's impossible.
Of course.
So again, we go back to this not knowing, this misunderstanding. In order for us to have this, you have to hire a lot more MEU personnel. And even then, I'll tell you, Mark, even then, it's an uphill fight. It's an uphill fight. The city is, as you know, it's very spread out. You can have, one call for MEU at the San Fernando Valley, and then the next call could be in Harbor.
Yeah.
What is that? What is that, a 45, 50
right? I was
minute
going to
drive?
say, for those of you listening in Seattle, Washington, or Boston, Massachusetts, yeah, it's across the entire city in rush hour traffic. 45 minutes, like by helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Right.
Yeah, if you're lucky. But not only talking about just the logistics as far as getting from one scene to another, but it's also the purpose of the MEU.
Right.
And I'm going to read a quote here, and this is under myth and misunderstanding. Quote, "I am deeply troubled that mental health experts were not called in," unquote. Quote again, "Officers failed to request any of the three then available," like you said, 3 for the entire city of Los Angeles, first of all. "Officers failed to request any of the 3 then available LAPD teams intended to help de-escalate encounters with people experiencing mental health crises." Now, this is in reference to the Keenan Anderson incident out of the traffic accident, who died with cocaine and marijuana in his system later on. And this quote is from now Mayor Karen Bass. The purpose of the MEU is not to get there and to assist in getting this person taken into custody. Am I wrong? Their job is, in other words, they're not going to intervene until uniformed or other law enforcement have actually gotten this person into physical custody. And seriously, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, so the purpose of MEU is to respond once the incident or situation is stabilized.
Okay.
So a man with a knife, you can't say it's stabilized.
Correct.
So an MEU person is not a police officer, wouldn't know what to do with a man with a knife. And even with Keenan Anderson, it was a traffic collision.
Mm-hmm.
Why in the world would you call an MEU person for a traffic collision?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have to understand that when officers get there, they have to stabilize the situation to make it safe, to make sure that the incident is safe, and then call MEU. But let's go a little further than that, Mark. Let's say it's an ADW call.
And explain what ADW is.
It's assault with a deadly weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have an ADW call, and the person on the other line says, "Yeah, he's got a knife in his hand, and he's hearing voices." Okay, what do you want the officer to do? Mm-hmm. Stay outside of the house until MEU shows up?
Right.
So let's put a scenario together. Let's say he does. Let's say the officer says, "Okay, I'll request MEU." Now MEU's coming from.
Now they're coming from Harbor to Mission.
Right. So
again, another helicopter ride across the city.
Right. Let's say with no traffic, 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
With no traffic. So let's give it 50 minutes. Mm-hmm. Now an incident occurs inside the house. Who are you going to blame?
Right.
You know, you're going to blame the MEU officer, or are you going to blame the two police officers that stood outside waiting for MEU? Mm-hmm. It's a lose-lose situation.
Right.
Unfortunately, folks, we do not have a crystal ball. I'm sorry. If we did, we would have no crime and we'd have no need for police officers. But that's not the way things work. An ADW call is an immediate police response. It doesn't matter if he's hearing voices.
That's
yes,
right.
You can request MEU, but you have to get in there and stabilize the situation.
Right.
You have to protect life. That is the core value of the Los Angeles police, sheriffs, CHP, all over the nation, is to preserve life first.
That's right.
And so are you trying to tell me that if the officers wait for MEU and something happens in the house, officer's fault? If the officers don't wait for MEU, go into the house and get into a shooting, officer's fault. It's like, so you're telling me there's no way to win this.
100%. And I'm telling you, Marcelo, you and I are on the same page on this. You laid it out perfectly. From these detractors of law enforcement, and I'm sorry to say it, I don't care if they're elected officials or they're so-called activists, whatever it is, these people are law enforcement detractors. They are not supporters of law enforcement. They can campaign and say whatever they want to, but all I can see or all I evaluate them on are their actions, right, not their words. I'm going to read another one here about, from the Protective League about myths and misunderstandings. Quote, "We do not respond." This is from, I think, Council Member Marquise Harris Dawson, LA City Council Member. "We do not respond to mental health calls with mental health care. We respond with guns and badges and blaring lights and shouting and commands that people may or may not be in a position to adhere to." I got to stop right there. I'm not even done with her quote. So if someone is, we call 5150, if someone has a mental or emotional, or by the way, a substance abuse problem that is limiting their ability to follow legal, ethical, moral commands, now it's the fault of the officer if this person cannot respond to commands. These people are so, to me, morally corrupt when they say things like this. So we have lights and sirens and saying things that people are may or may not be able to adhere to. Just this year, we have already lost 3 people. I will not be convinced by anybody that any of those people deserve to have their life taken, least of all Keenan Anderson. Again, Keenan Anderson is the one we're talking about right now. Those officers did everything by the book. I want to read one fact where the Protective League responded to that statement from the city council person. Fact: Not one of those incidents referenced by Council Member Harris Dawson was a quote unquote mental health call for service. It's exactly right. In fact, one incident involved a female victim in possession of a restraining order preventing her male abuser from being near her or her home. Marcelo, with that, I'm going to read this quote. You gave us a similar scenario about someone assault with a deadly weapon, ADW, and what's the officer do? Wait for the male, unit or not?
Right.
The victim reported that the male was, in fact, in her home, would not leave, and that he had access to a large knife. What does the officer do? So what this council person said is, quite frankly, it's pure ignorance or to lie. You pick it. You pick the choice here. But either way, she doesn't even take the time to do enough research to make an intelligent statement, comment, or even give an opinion about these incidents. So I think the Protected League has done a great job on not only the Keenan Anderson incident, but on these similar ones, and talking about these units, evaluation units in general. One thing I want to kind of finish up on in general here relates to these conclusions. And by the way, I'll just chime in if there's something else you want to touch on there that I'm missing.
No. I'm just listening to what you're saying, and it just goes back to what we're saying. This not only is it a misunderstanding for some of these politicians, council people, and let's face it, there are some council people that just dislike the police and will chime in at any point, even though without the knowledge of police procedures, just to basically to say, hey, look at me, I'm going against the Los Angeles Police Department, which is not only ridiculous, it's embarrassing. And it's disturbing, to me, to have some politician talk about something. And it's like you said, without doing her research, without understanding police procedures, and knowing that officers are there first and foremost to protect life. Now, like you said, the three incidents, the traffic accident, by the way, was a felony hit and run. So that means that the person that Keenan Anderson crashed into had injuries. So he was actually fleeing from a felony incident. The other one was the ADW, assault with a deadly weapon. And the third one was the restraining order violation. All valid police response, not MEU response. Okay. And even if it is something that MEU should go to, they are not supposed to be the first responders.
They shouldn't be the first responders.
And this is where I have trouble when people say, especially politicians that say, a mental evaluation unit should be first responders. No. Do your research. Understand. Like I said before, we don't have a crystal ball. I wish we did, but we don't. You don't know what's gonna happen in those incidents. We don't have this. It's not a training scenario where you can say, okay, training's over, stop. No, it doesn't work that way. And I just feel like these people are so out of touch of reality that an ADW can turn into the murder of a police officer just as fast that it could turn into a shooting of that suspect.
Correct. Well, the reason I laughed is because, listen, I was still around on the job when mental evaluation units, and again, they're different names for different agencies, was really being considered and implemented. And by the way, it's not all downside. We're not criticizing the attempt to have those resources when they're practical. But the reason I was giggling about this is because when I saw these coming into fruition, we, especially in management law enforcement, knew that unfortunately it was going to be very rare where the timing would be right, that these units can make a substantial impact on outcomes and enforcement contacts. And how ridiculous it was that anybody would ever suggest, or is that anyone ever suggests that they should be the first ones on scene.
Right.
That is a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for these people, the mental health care professionals trying to do their job, will become victims before they will become mitigators of a situation. So we knew how unrealistic, I'll use that word, that this whole proposal of having them be the first responders is. It's a ridiculous, quite frankly, fantasy. Oops, hey, we had a little camera malfunction there, so we had to reboot. We're good. Marcelo, you said you wanted to kind of edit something I was talking about a minute ago.
Yeah. So, just to be fair, when we find discrepancies in what we say, I like to correct it right away. One of the things that we said, because we did quote um, Karen, Mayor Bass, and it wasn't everything that was in the quote wasn't all her.
Yeah, I
So
see that now.
what Mayor Bass said was, "I am deeply troubled that mental health experts were not called in." That was her comment. The other comment came from this extremely experienced and a tremendous amount of experience and an expert in the LAPD. Apparently, oh, just kidding. It's Kenneth Mejia, the city controller, who knows nothing about law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
who said the following, and I quote: "Officers failed to request any of the three then available LAPD teams and intended to help de-escalate encounters with people experiencing mental health crisis." Uh, Ridiculous, first of all. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Obviously, Mr. Mejia is not an expert of the LAPD, nor does he know policy. Um, but apparently, he thinks that MEU is there to de-escalate encounters, and they are not. They are there to evaluate. Thus, the word mental evaluation unit. I know that's hard, but the answer, the question is in the answer. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying that on a serious note. On a more humorous note, we want to make sure we attribute idiotic statements to the right idiots. So I'm glad that you actually made that distinction. Um, uh, there are so many floating around. Yeah, it's hard to keep track, and people chiming in. You know what? Not only do people chime in after the fact with dumb and really uninformed statements about law enforcement, but I think maybe even worse is when they chime in before any number of facts are made to the public. And give you an example, we had a horrible, horrible shooting here in Southern California just recently in Monterey Park, California, where this deranged person, we still don't know for sure what the facts or the motive was behind this shooting. But so we have these people saying stuff on a local basis about local political basis here about LAPD and other law enforcement, and then of course you have the federal knuckleheads chiming in. For an example, with this Monterey Park shooting, which turned out to be, which as far as law enforcement professionals is irrelevant to us, we don't care, but it turned out to be um, an Asian on Asian shooting, which again it's irrelevant to me, but that's a factual thing. But before the facts came out, we had Chuck Schumer, our wonderful, not our wonderful senator, thank goodness, but a U.S. senator come out with a statement. This is before there was any press conference. We knew what happened at all. Quote, I'm heartbroken by the news of the shooting in Monterey Park amid Lunar New Year celebrations. I'm praying for the victims, their families, the first responders, which is wonderful. If you stop there, we can all be on the same page, no matter what your political leanings, things like that. But he continued, we must stand up to bigotry and hate wherever they rear their ugly heads, and we must keep working to stop gun violence.
Well, there it is.
There it is. It's the gun violence. It's not the violence committed by an individual. And by the way, I don't see any bigotry here with a perpetrator of a race committing violence against people of the same race. This is an evil criminal who committed this crime. But before the facts come out, Schumer calls this an act of bigotry. Why, I don't know, but it's one more example, and there's more. I won't even get into them because there's so many of these examples where people want to chime in and make these political statements. They don't have any knowledge of the pertinent immediate facts, or they don't have knowledge of law enforcement operations, policies, procedures, or challenges. It gets really, really old, but this is what they're dealing with. And when I said earlier that these people are detractors of law enforcement, they can say whatever they want to, but what I look at are actions. And we're talking about defunding. We're talking about things that are that label law enforcement racist and systemically racist and things like this. I don't believe that particular individual is living in reality, because we know in today's law enforcement, we do not live under those realities. So
Correct.
it's a tough time, but ladies and gentlemen, you have to keep the faith. Each of you, each of us, we have to be our own leaders. We have to keep supporting law enforcement. We have to call out horrible, heinous, evil behavior like we saw in Memphis when we see it. I'm certainly a cheerleader for law enforcement, but I am not a cheerleader for every single officer. I judge people on their individual behavior. And that's what we're doing right now, looking at these animals in Memphis who carried out an absolute heinous, quite frankly, in my opinion, murder against this poor man, Mr. Nichols in Tennessee. So keep the faith. I said, keep fighting, keep standing up, be outspoken, support law enforcement, be your own first responder, do the right thing, adhere to the law, abide by orders from law enforcement. If unfortunately get encountered for running a stop sign, do the right thing. You can always file a complaint later on. Don't resist.
Or call a supervisor to the scene.
Absolutely. Quite frankly, even a better remedy.
Sure.
Call a supervisor right there. So with that said, Marcelo, I appreciate you so much. Your expertise is greatly appreciated. Your friendship, of course, is even more appreciated. I want to thank my wonderful crew, Vince and Anthony, who are sitting back here right now watching us and fix the problems as they pop up. Do not forget our YouTube channel, Your Leo Nation. Follow us on Instagram. Check out our website, spread the word. We are growing. We're excited about it. We are fighting for law enforcement. We're fighting for the rule of law. Do not forget to click on Your Leo Project, our nonprofit partner. Send a few bucks. We're trying to help as many families of fallen law enforcement officers as we can. We can't do it without your help. And we thank you for listening, for watching. God bless you. Stay strong. God bless America.
God bless everyone.
Thanks.